The backyard smelled like grilled sardines and wine-soaked laughter. I stood near the lemon tree, silver hair catching the Portuguese sun, watching my daughters perform their usual theater of contempt. Maribel, 35, corporate lawyer with her mother's cheekbones and none of her discretion, was holding court near the stone patio. Konstanka, 32, the younger viper with perfectly manicured nails, was giggling into her sangria. Mama thinks she was some kind of soldier, Maribel announced to the cousins, her voice dripping with theatrical pity. She tells these stories about swimming in the dark, saving people, like an old woman's telenovela. The laughter cut through the afternoon heat. I felt it in my chest, that old familiar ache, the one that comes when your own blood treats your life like fiction. Konstanka turned to me, eyes bright with wine and cruelty.
Go on then, Mama. Tell us your call sign.
You know, like in the American movies. What did they call you? Vovo Guerrera? Grandmother warrior? More laughter. Cousins. In-laws. Even my sister looked away. I could have stayed silent. I'd done it for 20 years, swallowing their dismissal like bitter medicine, letting them build their version of me, fragile, forgettable, finished. But then I saw him. Captain Elias Rocha, my American-Portuguese cousin, standing by the grill. Former Navy SEAL. Broader now at 45, gray threading his dark hair. But those eyes that had seen me in the black water off the Azores, bleeding and steady, pulling his team from certain death. He was frozen, spatula in hand, watching my daughters like a predator watching prey. Maribel persisted.
Come on, Mama.
Your call sign. If you were really something special. I met Elias's eyes. He gave me the smallest nod. I turned to face my daughters, and for the first time in 2 decades, I let them see the ocean in me. Sombra Marinha, I said quietly. The entire backyard fell silent. Elias set down the spatula and walked forward, his voice dropping into that SEAL command tone I remembered from tactical operations. Apologize, he said, looking directly at my daughters.
Now.
My name is Dona Isadora Caldero. I am 60 years old, and I have learned that invisibility is a skill women my age master without trying. They see silver hair and assume softness. They see the lines around my eyes and read them as surrender. They see a widow who wears black too often and smell defeat. They have no idea. Before I tell you how a backyard barbecue dismantled my daughter's arrogance and restored a legacy they never knew existed, let me ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who should know you best? Have you ever swallowed humiliation just to keep the peace, only to discover that silence has its own cost? If so, drop your story in the comments, because you're not alone. Before I tell you how that day unfolded, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being dismissed, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about dignity, legacy, and the quiet violence of being unseen. What happened next might just change how you see the women in your own family. I live in a modest house in Setúbal, overlooking the Sado estuary. The water has always called to me. Some mornings I stand on my balcony with coffee, watching the tide shift, and I remember what it felt like to move through darkness with nothing but breath discipline and a blade strapped to my thigh. My daughters think I've always been this way, slow-moving, soft-spoken, a woman whose greatest accomplishment was raising them and surviving their father's death. Antonio died 8 years ago. Heart attack. He was a good man, steady, the kind who paid bills on time and kissed my forehead before bed. But he never knew who I was before I became his wife. I never told him about the night extractions, the covert maritime operations, the bodies I pulled from Blackwater, or the ones I left behind. Marriage has a way of editing women. Motherhood, even more so. I became the version of myself they needed, patient, nurturing, endlessly forgiving. I attended every school recital, cooked every Sunday meal, listened to their complaints about teachers and boys and later, bosses and husbands. And slowly, year by year, I disappeared. Not all at once. Just enough that when Maribel looked at me, she saw obligation. When Konstanka hugged me, I felt performance. They loved me the way you love old furniture, familiar, useful, but nothing you'd ever truly notice. It started small. A comment here. Mama, you're remembering wrong again. A joke there. She's getting confused. Old age, you know. Then it escalated. At family dinners, when I'd offer advice, hard-earned, blood-bought wisdom about loyalty, discipline, reading danger in a room, they'd exchange glances. Mama lives in the past, Maribel would say, smiling like she'd just said something kind. Konstanka would pat my hand. It's sweet that you think you understand how the world works now.
Sweet.
As if my life had been decorative. They dismissed my stories as exaggeration. When I mentioned my years working in maritime security, they laughed. When I spoke about discipline, endurance, the importance of reading a situation before reacting, they nodded the way you nod at children. Mama, you worked in an office, Konstanka said once, bored. You filed papers. Don't romanticize it. I never corrected them. Not because they were right, but because the truth felt too large, too dangerous, too much like vanity. What would I say? That before you were born, I moved like smoke across water? That I earned a call sign that made men twice my size hesitate? That I saved lives, American lives, Portuguese lives, in operations your clearance level will never touch? I stayed quiet, and they mistook silence for emptiness. I was born in Setúbal, 1965. The sea was my first language. My father was a fisherman. My mother ran a small boarding house near the docks. I grew up watching men return from the water, some triumphant, some broken, all of them shaped by what the ocean demanded. By 16, I could swim farther than most boys. By 18, I could hold my breath underwater for 3 minutes. By 20, I had a reputation. A menina que nada como tubarão. The girl who swims like a shark. That's when they found me. 1985. A man in civilian clothes approached me at the dock. He didn't introduce himself. Just asked if I was interested in work that required silence, strength, and absolute discretion. I said yes before he finished the question. 3 months later, I was in a covert training program run jointly by Portuguese naval intelligence and NATO maritime units. We didn't have a name. We didn't exist on paper. We were shadows in the water, operators trained for extractions, infiltrations, and eliminations that couldn't be traced. I was one of 3 women in a cohort of 30. The men expected me to fail. I outlasted 22 of them. Training was brutal, night swims in freezing Atlantic water, underwater navigation with zero visibility, combat diving with full gear, close quarters blade work, and something they called drown-proofing, staying calm while instructors held you under until your lungs screamed. I learned to control my breath, my heartbeat, my fear. I learned that panic is a choice. I learned that my body, lean, quiet, underestimated, was a weapon they never saw coming. By 1987, I was operational. My first mission, extracting a Portuguese intelligence officer from a compromised safe house in Mozambique. We went in by water, 3 of us, no backup. I was 22 years old. I slit 2 throats that night and didn't hesitate. When we extracted, my team leader, Captain Tavares, a man who rarely smiled, looked at me in the zodiac and said, "Você é uma sombra." You are a shadow. The name stuck. Sombra Marinha, sea shadow. For the next 15 years, I operated in the dark. Covert extractions.
Maritime interdiction.
Counter-narcotics ops off the African coast. I worked with American SEALs, British SBS, French Commandos, Marine. I was good. Better than good. I was a ghost who swam through blood and salt, and no one ever saw me coming. Then I met Antonio. He was a civil engineer, kind, stable, far removed from my world. He made me laugh. He made me feel like I could be soft. By 1995, I was pregnant with Maribel. By 1998, Konstanka arrived. Motherhood and covert ops don't coexist. I retired quietly.
No ceremony. No pensión.
Just a handshake and a file that disappeared into classified archives. I became a wife. A mother. A woman who made soup and attended parent-teacher meetings and pretended she'd never killed anyone. I thought I was protecting them. I thought if they never knew, they'd be safer. Cleaner. Free from the weight of what I'd done. But erasure has consequences. They grew up seeing a mother who seemed less. A woman who deferred to their father, who stayed quiet in arguments, who let life happen to her instead of shaping it. They inherited my silence and mistook it for weakness. And I let them. The barbecue was at my sister Helena's house. Extended family. Cousins from Lisbon. Elias had flown in from Virginia, on leave, staying with Helena for 2 weeks. I wore a simple linen dress, cream-colored, elegant, but unremarkable. My daughters arrived late, loud, already tipsy from wine they'd drunk on the drive. Maribel kissed my cheek without looking at me. Konstanka handed me her purse like I was the coat check. "Mama, don't embarrass us today," Konstanka whispered, smiling. I smiled back. I never do. The afternoon unfolded like all the others.
Food.
Laughter. My daughters holding court, telling stories about their work, their vacations, their husbands. No one asked me anything. Elias stood near the grill, quiet, watchful. We'd exchanged a polite greeting earlier. He'd hugged me, held on a second longer than necessary, and said, "It's good to see you, Tia." I saw the recognition in his eyes, the respect. But he said nothing.
Not yet.
It was late afternoon when Maribel started. "Mama has these stories," she announced, laughing, gesturing with her wine glass. "She thinks she was some kind of secret agent. Swam in the dark. Saved soldiers. It's adorable, really." My sister Helena shifted uncomfortably. My brother-in-law looked away. Konstanka joined in. "She tells us she had a call sign, like in Top Gun." She giggled. "What was it again, Mama? Super swimmer? Aqua Granny?" Laughter rippled through the patio. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something older. Something that had been sleeping. "Mama, seriously," Maribel pressed, smiling cruelly. "If you were really some kind of operative, what was your call sign?" The yard quieted. Everyone was watching. I looked at Elias. He was staring at my daughters like he was deciding whether to speak or let them drown. Then he met my eyes. And nodded. I turned back to Maribel and Konstanka. "Sombra Marinia," I said clearly. Silence. Elias set down his spatula and walked forward, his entire demeanor shifting, shoulders back, voice dropping into that command tone I remembered from operations. "Apologize," he said, looking directly at my daughters. "Now." Maribel laughed nervously. "Elias, You're disrespecting a woman who saved my life," he cut her off, voice like steel. "And the lives of 6 other men on my team." The entire backyard froze. Konstanka blinked. "What are you talking about?" Elias turned to face the family, and when he spoke, it wasn't to my daughters, it was to everyone. July 14th, 2001. Azores. Covert extraction operation. Our Zodiac capsized in a storm. We were pinned down, taking fire from the shore, 3 men injured, communications dead. We were going to die in that water.
He paused.
And then she appeared.
He looked at me. "No gir."
Just a blade and a rebreather. She pulled 2 of my men out of the current, stabilized our medic, and held off hostiles long enough for backup to arrive. She took a bullet through the shoulder and didn't make a sound. My daughters stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Elias continued. "Sombra Marinia isn't a cute nickname. It's a call sign that made grown men in naval special operations shut up and listen. Your mother has more confirmed saves than most operators will ever see. She's been decorated by 3 governments, none of which you'll ever read about." Maribel's face drained of color. Konstanka whispered, "Mama?" Elias's voice softened, but the command remained. "So when I tell you to apologize, I'm not asking." Silence. Maribel looked at me, tears forming. "Mama, I didn't know." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't ask." Konstanka's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell us?" I held her gaze. "Because I wanted you to be free. But freedom without respect is just arrogance." Later, after the family dispersed in awkward silence, Elias found me by the lemon tree. He handed me a small wooden box. Inside, a maritime challenge coin.
Nato in Sia.
My call sign engraved on the back. "I've carried this for 23 years, he said quietly. "I was waiting for the right time to return it. Guess today was it." I traced the engraving with my thumb. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said firmly. "I did. You've been invisible long enough, Tia." I looked up at him. "They hate me now." "No," he corrected. "They're ashamed. There's a difference. Shame can become respect. If you let it." I nodded slowly. He squeezed my shoulder, the way soldiers do when words fail. "You're still Sombra Marinia," he said. "Don't forget it again." The weeks after the barbecue were strange. Maribel called. Apologized again. Asked questions, tentative, careful. "What was it like? Were you scared? Did you kill people?" I answered honestly. "Not all of it, but enough." Konstanka sent flowers. Then a letter. Long. Raw. Full of shame and confusion, and something like awe. They began to see me differently. Not as a relic. Not as a burden. As a woman who had lived. At the next family dinner, Maribel introduced me to her colleagues as my mother, who served in covert maritime operations. Not with pity, with pride. Constanca's son, my grandson Miguel, asked me to teach him to swim. I took him to the estuary. "Vovo," he said, treading water beside me. "Were you really called Sea Shadow?" I smiled. "I still am." He grinned. "That's the coolest thing I've ever heard." I am 60 years old. I have silver hair and hands that remember violence. My daughters will never fully understand the woman I was. But they're learning to respect the woman I am. And that I've learned is enough. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. And sometimes reclaimed. I still stand on my balconies in mornings, coffee in hand, watching the estuary shift with the tide. The ocean remembers.
And so do I.
If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or erased, know this. Your silence is not your story. Your legacy is. And the right moment will come to stand in the fullness of who you've always been. Mine came at a barbecue. Yours will come too. Just be ready when it does.